Welcome back, 7th grade historians. Let's jump right into this explainer. If you've been following along with the St. Paul Middle School American History Curriculum Framework, you know we've already covered a ton of ground. But today, we're taking a step back. We're going to put on our detective hats to investigate the true formation of the American identity. And actually, even more importantly, we need to unlearn a few things that just aren't entirely accurate. So let's kick things off with a massive question to check a major misconception. When you think of the founding of the United States, do you just picture this perfectly unified group of people all shaking hands and agreeing on the exact same ideals? Well, history is rarely that simple. We really need to challenge that idea of a single, simple story. Here is our agenda for this explainer. 1. The single story myth. 2. Myth versus historical reality. 3. Rights and compromise. 4. Expanding identity. 5. Evidence-based scenario check. And finally, 6. A final reflection. Let's get right to it. Okay, Section 1, the single story myth. We're investigating the idealized founding of the U.S. We need to anchor our learning right out of the gate with this key vocabulary word, because our curriculum specifically asks us to analyze the tension between myth and actual history. Now, in history, a myth isn't like a fairy tale with dragons, right? It's a version of events that has been smoothed out. It's been idealized or simplified so much that it completely loses the complicated and often messy truth. Let's move to Section 2, Myth versus Historical Reality. We're looking closely at early colonization. And this brilliantly illustrates that contrast. Instead of just a peaceful settlement where everyone shared meals and got along, the reality was a massive collision of worlds. The true historical account involves complex and often really tense interactions with indigenous populations. It includes groups seeking religious freedom, sure, but while simultaneously establishing strict, exclusionary communities of their own. And crucially, it involves the harsh, brutal establishment of transatlantic slavery. The American story is one of new opportunities for some, built directly alongside deep displacement for others. Moving into Section 3, Rights, Representation, and Compromise, the messy reality of the American Revolution era. So, tracing this chronological timeline is super important to see how early tensions over things like taxation evolved into a full-blown revolution. We start with colonial development, soaring into the lofty ideals of the Declaration of Independence. But by 1787, the creation of the U.S. Constitution wasn't just a unified, happy march toward liberty. It was heavily shaped by deep, messy disagreements. This resulted in compromises that literally negotiated the legal status of enslaved human beings. Now, what's absolutely fascinating here is how clearly we can see that the concept of citizenship meant drastically different things depending entirely on your perspective. As outlined in our Foundations of American Liberty Guide, for many founding fathers, this era meant newfound political power. But for enslaved people and Native Americans, the story was starkly different. It meant continued bondage or devastating displacement. You simply cannot understand the American identity without looking at all of these lived experiences at once. Stepping right into Section 4, Expanding the American Identity, Growing and Dividing in a New Nation. Make sure to jot this definition down. To understand the expanding nation, we really need to understand nationalism. It's that strong feeling of pride and devotion to the nation as a whole. It's the idea that everyone is in this together, working toward a shared, grand American vision, regardless of which state they live in. It was a powerfully unifying glue for a young country. But, conversely, sectionalism was fiercely pulling the country apart, as different regions developed completely different economic and social priorities. Think of it like cheering only for your specific team, say the industrial North or the agricultural South, rather than cheering for the entire league itself. This comparison highlights the massive push and pull effect happening at the time. Our Formation of an American Identity Unit guide shows how the nation was literally defining itself through this constant balancing act. You had the desire for national growth on one side, which was constantly being threatened by those fierce dividing regional interests on the other. And this tension really exploded with Manifest Destiny. This 19th century belief that Western expansion was both justified and totally inevitable was a powerful expression of nationalism for some. But it deeply accelerated sectionalism because the country started fiercely battling over whether those newly acquired territories would allow slavery or remain free. Okay, it is time for Section 5, Evidence-Based Scenario Check. Let's test your historical detective skills. Let's look at this scenario carefully and use the evidence we just discussed. Imagine Western settlers claim manifest destiny to expand, but Northern politicians oppose it because it might expand slavery and hurt Northern factories. Are these Northern politicians demonstrating nationalism or sectionalism? Think about it for a second. Which of our key vocabulary terms fits best here?
Well, if you guessed sectionalism, you are spot on. This breakdown shows exactly why. The Northern politicians aren't looking at the broad national idea of expansion. They are fiercely protecting their own backyard. They are prioritizing their factories and their regional political power over national unity. That fits the definition of sectionalism perfectly.
Finally, Section 6, Final Student Reflection. Thinking about the past and the present. We've successfully busted the myth of a single founding story today. But before we go, I want you to leave this explainer pondering this final reflection prompt. Based on the early conflicts over rights, slavery, and expansion, how do these historical divisions still shape what it means to have an American identity today? Because the conflicts that forged our early history are still echoing loudly in our society right now. Thank you so much for joining this historical investigation, and remember, never stop questioning the single story.